I just want to get out of here. I want to get. I know that God has a plan for me. It's to be in prison right now, but not stay here.
There is a man in a maximum security prison in Wisconsin right now. He wakes up at the same time every morning. He eats the same food. He walks the same 40 feet of hallway. He sees the same walls. And above his bunk, there are photographs. A woman and 2 little girls. He put them there himself. Most people who have followed this case believe they know everything about Chris Watts. The murders, the affair, the interrogation tapes, the plea, the sentence. But what has been occurring inside that facility across the last 7.5 years, the chapter the cameras stopped recording, is something that even people who have followed this case from the beginning do not fully know. What that life actually looks like, what it sounds like, and why the people who loved Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico say what Chris Watts is living inside those walls is the only form of justice that makes sense. This analysis is drawn from Wisconsin Department of Corrections public records, court filings, letters Chris Watts actually wrote, accounts from his former cellmate, and verified reports published by People magazine, the Daily Mail, and NewsNation. Every verified claim is attributed to its source. November 19, 2018. Weld County Courthouse, Colorado. Judge Marcelo Kopkow had sat on the bench for nearly 17 years. He had handled thousands of cases. He had seen the full range of what human beings do to each other. When he stood before Chris Watts that morning, he was measured and deliberate in every word he chose.
Words that come to mind when I hear the evidence in this case are a senseless crime and the viciousness. I could objectively say that this is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen, and nothing less than a maximum sentence would be appropriate.
5 consecutive life sentences, plus 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, plus 36 additional years for tampering with the bodies. Chris Watts will die in that prison. That is not in question. But here is what most people watching this do not fully understand. The sentence, the numbers, the legal finality, the years, was not the real punishment. The real punishment began the moment he walked through the intake doors and understood for the first time exactly what he had traded his family's lives for. 14 days after sentencing, on December 3, 2018, the Colorado Department of Corrections transferred him out of state, not to benefit Chris Watts, to protect the state's own liability. Inmates inside Colorado facilities were already coordinating threats. Death threats had flooded corrections offices. Keeping him in Colorado meant riot risk, serious harm, and catastrophic institutional exposure. On December 5, 2018, he arrived at Dodge Correctional Institution in Walpin, Wisconsin, a maximum security facility that has housed some of the state's most dangerous incarcerated individuals for decades. It holds roughly 1,000 men, lifers, violent offenders, individuals who have spent years learning how to survive in a place like this. Every one of them knows what Chris Watts did. That is where his real sentence began. Before we continue, if you have been following this case and you want this kind of deep, verified, sustained coverage, subscribe to Unresolved Years Mysteries right now. This channel covers these cases the way they deserve, with sourced facts and respect for the people who were lost. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico deserve that. Here is something that surprises almost everyone who learns it. Chris Watts is not in protective custody. He is in general population. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections confirmed this in a 2024 statement to People magazine. He is housed alongside the general prison population, with access to recreation, work assignments, and religious services. He is not isolated in a solo cell for his safety. He walks the same hallways, eats in the same cafeteria, and works alongside men who know he strangled his pregnant wife and forced his daughter's bodies through 8-inch hatch openings into crude oil tanks. Prison has a hierarchy that is widely documented and consistently described by anyone who has spent time inside a serious facility. At the top sit those with influence and earned reputation. At the bottom sit those who harmed children. And below even them, within that same bottom tier, sit those who killed their own children. Chris Watts has occupied the absolute floor of that hierarchy for over 7 years. Former incarcerated individual Eddie Nevis spoke to the New York Post about what that position practically means. He said that in a facility full of people who did genuinely terrible things, being considered the worst person there carries a specific daily weight. He said that without constant guard presence, Watts would face immediate violence. A source connected to Watts confirmed to People magazine that he lives in a state of sustained fear, that he keeps to himself, that he avoids unnecessary conversations, that he has learned to survive by becoming as invisible as possible. This is verified through Wisconsin DOC public records, court filings, and corrections official statements. 5:30 a.m. morning count. Chris Watts wakes up in his cell. Guards verify every individual on the block. The same as the morning before. The same as tomorrow. Before he takes a single step into another identical day, he sees them. Above his bunk. Photographs. Shanann smiling. Bella and Celeste hugging. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections confirmed this in 2019 after a public petition demanded the photographs be removed. The institution's response was direct. Inmates are legally permitted to possess family photographs, and there is no legal basis for removal. For more than 2,700 mornings, Chris Watts has opened his eyes and seen their faces before anything else. A source told People magazine in 2019 that he has nothing to fill his hours except thinking, that he thinks about what he did every day, that he is tormented by his past and the decisions he made. In June 2026, 7 years later, that torment has not lifted. It has become the permanent texture of every single morning. Work. Chris Watts is employed as a prison custodian, cleaning floors, maintaining common areas. Confirmed by the Wisconsin DOC. He earns between 25 and 75 cents per hour, approximately $80 per month. A man who once owned a 5-bedroom home in Frederick, Colorado, and held a professional position at an oil and gas company, now mops the same floors in the same building for a fraction of $1, week after week, year after year. Recreation is permitted once or twice daily, Monday through Friday. He has outbound phone access to an approved contact list. Every call is monitored and recorded. He cannot say a single word to anyone outside those walls without it being heard. He attends Bible study regularly. It is one of the few constants in a life that has been stripped of nearly everything. Research on long-term maximum security incarceration documents a consistent pattern. Chronic stress, sustained hypervigilance, and the progressive erosion of identity, when every choice, every freedom, and every external marker of who a person was has been removed. For Chris Watts, those documented effects are compounded by something no clinical study can fully account for: the specific and inescapable knowledge of what he did, and the complete impossibility of ever building distance from it. He cannot log off. He cannot relocate. He cannot begin again. He is inside the same facility, surrounded by the same population, under a sentence with no terminal point. A source in ongoing contact with Watts confirmed to People magazine that he is tormented, that there is no peace in that cell. And what has surfaced in his letters, the letters he writes from inside Dodge, reveals a man reaching for anything capable of providing a sense of meaning. Because prison has taken everything else away. He writes to women. He attends Bible study. He holds scripture with the grip of someone who has nothing else to hold. In letters published by the Daily Mail in January 2026, written to a woman named Deborah, who first contacted him in 2022, Chris Watts wrote that God had a plan for him, that being in prison was part of that plan, the way other difficult things in history were part of a larger purpose. Forensic psychologists who study extended incarceration point to a specific pattern when examining language like this. A mind under existential pressure will construct meaning wherever meaning can be found. When a person faces a life sentence with no exit, when the people who once mattered to them have disappeared one by one, the mind reaches for any framework capable of making the unbearable survivable. That is what 7.5 years has produced in Chris Watts. He is not at peace. He is holding on. In August 2025, NewsNation reported on letters in which Watts wrote that he was a new man, that the person who committed those acts no longer existed inside him. Read that not as a declaration of freedom. Read it as a man who needs to believe that identity has dissolved, because the alternative, fully inhabiting the consciousness of someone who planned his family's deaths over weeks, who attempted to harm his unborn child, who drove his daughters to an oil field while they slept across each other in the back seat, is something no mind can sustain across decades without something to protect it. In June 2021, Inside Edition reported on confessions Chris Watts had made in private correspondence, confessions he had never offered to law enforcement. He admitted the murders were planned across several weeks. He admitted he secretly gave Shanann oxycodone in an attempt to end her pregnancy, believing that if the pregnancy ended, it would be easier to leave her and pursue his relationship with Nikki Kessinger. He admitted that on the night of August 12, 2018, he attempted to smother Bella and Celeste while they slept. He failed. They woke up. According to his own confession to investigators, Bella had already witnessed what happened to her mother. She watched him carry Shanann's body down the stairs. She was crying. She asked him what was wrong with Mommy. He told her Mommy was sick. He then put both girls in the back seat of his truck alongside their mother's body and drove 40 minutes to the oil site where he worked. His daughters fell in and out of sleep, lying against each other in the back seat. At the site, both girls asked him what he was doing to Mommy. He did not answer. Investigators later documented that Bella's final words to her father, spoken in the moment before he killed her, were 3 words. "Daddy, no." A woman who visited Watts in prison and later spoke with ABC News described his demeanor when discussing the murders. She said his eyes would go dark, that he spoke about it with a detachment she found deeply unsettling, as if describing events that had happened to someone else. 7 years later, those memories exist in the same cell as him. They are present when he wakes up and sees the photographs. They are present when he mops the floor. They are present when the lights go out. There is no distance from them. That is not speculation. That is the documented reality of what long-term incarceration in maximum security does. And for Chris Watts, the specific weight of those memories is something no scripture and no letter from a stranger will ever fully cover. In 2022, People magazine cited a source confirming that Chris Watts had been corresponding with multiple women throughout his time at Dodge. Some write letters. Some deposit money into his commissary account. His former cellmate Dylan Tallman spoke to the Daily Mail in 2024. Tallman described a pattern he observed directly. Watts becomes deeply attached to a correspondent very quickly, to the point of fixation. She becomes the center of his focus, until, inevitably, the contact stops. Psychologists who study long-term incarceration understand the mechanism clearly. Human beings require connection to function. When every ordinary avenue of connection has been closed, no family nearby, no sustained friendships, no private relationship, no unmonitored conversation, a person reaches for whatever remains available. For Chris Watts, what remains is letters and monitored calls. The psychological phenomenon that leads some people to initiate correspondence with convicted killers is documented in clinical literature. The motivations vary: a belief that they can change someone, an attraction to the notoriety, a form of connection seeking that has found an unusual outlet. In letters to Deborah written in October 2025, Watts wrote that in a different set of circumstances he believed he could have had a relationship with her, but that God had other plans for his life. Whatever one makes of that language, the picture it draws is the same. A 41-year-old man in a Wisconsin maximum security facility, earning a fraction of $1 per hour, spending what little he has on postage, writing to a woman he will never meet. That is what remains of the life he believed he was building on August 13, 2018. Beyond the isolation, beyond the monotony, beyond the letters and the photographs, there is something Chris Watts lives with every hour: physical danger. In the prison environment, men who kill their own children occupy the lowest position in the social hierarchy, not because other incarcerated individuals are morally consistent people, but because in a population where most men have someone who matters to them, the deliberate killing of one's own children is something that population agrees, in its own way, is beyond justification. Eddie Neves, speaking to the New York Post, was direct about what that means practically. Without constant guard presence, violence would be immediate. Chris Watts knows exactly where he stands in that facility. A source connected to him told People magazine he has been aware of it every day for more than 7 years. Every meal requires calculation. Every hallway requires awareness. Every new arrival is assessed. One distracted guard, one transfer that doesn't follow protocol, one moment where institutional attention shifts and that sustained vigilance never stops running. It cannot be turned off. It is built into the reality of where he is. Carry that awareness for 7 years. Then carry it for 35 more. There is a recorded call from inside Dodge Correctional Institution that most people following this case have never heard. Chris Watts on the phone with a private investigator and a woman named Anna, who appears in his verified prison visitation records as an approved visitor. In this call, he talks about the law, about whether his confession could be legally challenged, about polygraph administration protocols, about whether any ground remains that hasn't been examined. And then he says something that no secondhand account fully conveys.
I just want to get out of here. I know that God has a plan for me, and it's to be in prison right now, but not stay here.
Not with fury, not with the energy of someone who believes freedom is realistically within reach, with the hollow ground-down sound of a man who has repeated those words to himself for years and is finally saying them into a phone. He won't get out. 5 life sentences, 84 additional years, no parole, no realistic legal challenge, no door, no defined endpoint, no final morning, just 35 more years of the same count, the same hallway, the same photographs, the same men who would harm him without hesitation if the conditions were right. Shanann's father, Frank Rizuchek, said he doesn't want Chris Watts to die. He wants him to spend his life in prison thinking about what he did every single day. That phone call is what thinking about it every single day actually sounds like. Not defiance. Exhaustion. 7 years in, with no end approaching. If this is the kind of verified, carefully researched coverage that helps you understand what justice actually looks like in cases like this, subscribe to Unresolved Years Mysteries and leave a comment below. Tell us whether you believe life in prison is a harsher sentence than execution. This community takes these questions seriously. I read every one. In the weeks after his arrest, his parents Ronnie and Cindy stood by him. They visited. They sent support. In December 2018, Cindy Watts gave a television interview suggesting Shanann's personality had played a role in what happened, a statement that generated national outrage and caused deep additional pain to the Rizuchek family. What has happened since is significant. According to multiple reports, the relationship between Chris Watts and his parents has substantially deteriorated. His mother and father have not been publicly visible in his life for years. His sister has been entirely silent. No statements, no public presence. The Rizuchek family has made clear they want no contact with him. Shanann's father Frank has been explicit about that. Dylan Tallman told the Daily Mail that Watts speaks about feeling abandoned, about the unfairness of his situation. Sit with that for a moment. The parents who defended him, distant. The sister who bore his name, silent. The friends, gone. The wife, the daughters, the unborn son he was carrying, dead by his own deliberate choices. He is surrounded by roughly 1,000 men and is completely alone. That isolation is not something the sentence created. It is something Chris Watts created. And the 7.5 years inside Dodge Correctional Institution have given him nothing to do except live inside it, with no exit and nothing to fill it except monitored calls and letters from women who don't fully understand what they're corresponding with. Dr. Lena Dolan, a licensed psychotherapist who conducted extensive research on Chris Watts' psychology, concluded that he presents the profile of a covert narcissist, an individual who required a constant supply of external validation to maintain his sense of self. In his previous life, that validation came from multiple simultaneous directions: his family, the affair, the performance of being the dependable husband, the dedicated father, the trusted employee. Prison has reduced that supply to near zero. Letters that slow down over time, an occasional approved phone call, a chaplain. Strip those away, and what remains is a man alone with what he did in a cell in Wisconsin, with no one coming. Every morning before Chris Watts begins another day identical to the one before it, he looks at the images above his bunk. Shanann smiling, Bella and Celeste hugging. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections confirmed in 2019, after a public petition circulated demanding their removal, that there is no legal foundation to take them down. Family photographs are permitted property. They stay. Some people who have followed this case closely believe those photographs represent the most severe single dimension of his punishment. That before the cafeteria line, before the mop, before the recorded phone call, He is required every morning to look at the faces of the people he planned and chose to destroy. His 4-year-old daughter, his 3-year-old daughter, the woman who was 15 weeks pregnant with his son, Bella, who saw him drag her mother's body down the stairs wrapped in a sheet and asked what was wrong with mommy. That question has not stopped existing. It has not resolved across more than 2,700 mornings. And based on everything verified about his sentence, it will remain present for approximately 12,000 more mornings still to come. Those photographs are not going anywhere, and neither is he. Here is the question this case has circled for years, and the one this analysis examines directly. Is life in prison, specifically Chris Watts's life in prison, actually a harsher punishment than execution would have been? Chris Watts is 41 years old, born May 16, 1985. Based on average American male life expectancy, he has approximately 35 more years inside Dodge Correctional Institution ahead of him. 35 more years of 5:30 a.m. counts. 35 more years cleaning floors for 50 cents an hour. 35 more years at the absolute bottom of a prison hierarchy. 35 more years with no private moment, no free choice, no path forward. 35 more years waking up to those photographs. When he dies, whether from illness, age, or something that occurs inside that general population facility, he will very likely be interred in a prison cemetery. No ceremony. No public acknowledgement. No moment at which anyone pauses. Many people who supported the death penalty in this case believed that keeping him alive was mercy. That execution would have served justice more completely. But here is what execution would have given him that life in prison does not. An end. A defined final morning. A last breath. And then nothing. No more photographs. No more identical hallways. No more floor to mop. No more letters that eventually stop coming. Chris Watts does not receive an end. He receives 35 more years of the same morning. The same walls. The same men who would harm him without hesitation. The same monitored calls. The same photographs waiting above his bunk when his eyes open. And the world will not stop watching. The Netflix documentary released in 2020 ensured this case continues reaching new audiences. Each year, people who weren't following the news in 2018 discover every documented detail. The body camera footage, the neighborhood interviews, the polygraph session, the oil tanks. His notoriety is not diminishing with time. It is being inherited by each generation that finds this story. He will never be anonymous. He will never be forgotten. He will never outrun it. Shanann's father, Frank Razuchik, said he does not want Chris Watts to die. He wants him to live with what he did, every day, for the rest of his life. In June 2026, on day 2878 since the murders, that is precisely what is happening. Shanann Watts was 34 years old. Bella Watts was 4. Celeste Watts was 3. Nico Watts never drew a breath outside his mother's body. They did not get 35 more years. They did not get another morning. Shanann did not get to hold the son she was carrying. Bella did not get to begin school. Celeste did not get to grow into the child those home videos were already showing her becoming. In a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, the man who took all of that from them wakes up every morning to their faces. He mops floors for 50 cents an hour. He writes letters to women he will never meet. He holds scripture in a cell he will never leave. He navigates hallways full of men who would hurt him without hesitation if given the chance. He makes phone calls that are recorded and monitored and will never produce freedom. He falls asleep, and tomorrow he will wake up and do it again. For 35 more years. Frank Razuchik said he wants Chris Watts to spend every day of his remaining life thinking about what he did. In June 2026, on day 2878, he is still in that cell. Still waking up to those faces. Still thinking about it. That is the sentence inside the sentence. And it has barely begun.
She loved with everything she had, posted every smile, every laugh. 2 little girls with their daddy's eyes, a baby boy she never got to hold. She drove through the dark to get back home. Didn't know those were her last smiles alone. The world was sleeping when the lights went out, and the girls who called her mama made no sound. We saw the videos, we know their names. We watched the story and we felt the pain. They were real, they were here, they were everything. Shannon, we see you in every mother's arms tonight. Bella, we hear you in every child who sleeps in the light. Celeste, sweet Celeste, you were only 3 years old. And Nico, little Nico, you never got to see the world, but we remember. Oh, we remember every single one of you. Bella held her blanket close and asked a question no child should ever know. She trusted the one who should have kept her safe, and that is something time will never erase. Celeste with a laugh, her CC smile, her innocent eyes, her whole life ahead. They deserved a lifetime, they deserved the years, they deserved a world that wouldn't disappear. We saw the videos, we know that the story and we felt the pain. They were real, they were here, they were everything. Shannon, we see you in every mother's arms tonight. Bella, we hear you in every child who sleeps in the light. Celeste, sweet Celeste, you were only 3 years old. And Nico, you never got to see the world, but we remember. Oh, we remember every single one of you. We remember. Justice came, but it can't bring back the life you lived, the love you had, the morning you should still be in the world that lost 4 lights within. Shanann, you were enough, you were more than enough. You were a mother, a fighter, a heart full of love. And those 2 little girls, they were your whole world. And Nico, Nico, you were already loved. Shannon, we see you in every mother who fights to survive. Bella, we hear you in every child who gets to stay alive. Celeste, sweet Celeste, the world should have been yours to know. And Nico, little Nico, we grieve the life you never got to grow, but we remember. Oh God, we remember. We will never let them forget your names. We remember. We remember. Shannon, Bella, Celeste, Nicole.
Shanann, Bella, Celeste, Nico. Remember their names. If this case means something to you, if Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico mean something to you, leave a comment and tell me. Do you believe life in prison is a harsher sentence than execution would have been? Does what Chris Watts is living through constitute justice for these 4 people? This community takes those questions seriously. I read every comment. If this is the kind of sourced, deeply researched coverage you want more of, subscribe to Unresolved Years Mysteries. We cover these cases with verified facts and full respect for the people who were lost.